And we looked at a wide range of industrial uses. So manufacturing is a small piece of it, but warehousing, wholesaling, utilities, construction, we really wanted to broaden that perspective, and when we took the charge of industry means PDR is a lot more than just the traditional manufacturing, so let's make sure we note that as we do our survey. So the districts, we have 15 of them. I should say that even deciding where we should survey was also part of the discussion. The initial names and the boundaries for the districts came from the Planning Commission. They provided that to us. We looked at them, and we looked at some of the zoning around the existing districts, and we expanded the districts slightly so that we could make sure we were surveying adjacent land that might have some relevance to how those districts would be used. And in some cases, we lopped off things that we expanded because it just wasn't relevant. So the districts did change slightly in terms of how big they were as we went through the study. It amounts to about 16,000 acres. So it's about 90% of industrial land in Philadelphia is focused within these 15 districts. About 9,400 acres of that is currently zoned and used for industry. If you take into account the ports and the transportation, that's about half of that amount. So really we're talking about 4,000 to 5,000 acres of land that's zoned and used industrial that's not a port, essentially, an airport. Not surprisingly, from some of the data that we had, we mapped things like employment. It was important for us to get a sense of industrial intensity. This map just shows the employment of wholesale industries within Philadelphia, basically the bigger circle and more of the employment. No surprise here, the majority of the employment was focused within the 15 districts. I'm showing you this because it's an important part of the database that we use to help develop some sense of industrial intensity from a land perspective. And zoning as well, this is one of the first things we did even before we went surveying. We went out and we looked at Philadelphia zoning in 1954, and then we looked at it in 2008, just kind of overlapped them. What the map shows where it's really light, for instance, is where it was zoned industrial in 1954 and was no longer zoned industrial in 2008. And then there are other places where you see gray, particularly up in the Northeast, that's currently zoned industrial, but it wasn't zoned industrial in 1954. So we could get a sense of some of the patterns of how industrial use has changed. And if you look long and hard enough at this map, I'm not going to ask you to do that now. Basically, what it shows is that the industrial use has been intensifying and also scattering to the edges of the city. So that's been the long process. And when we did the survey, no surprise, it's exactly what we found. About 3/4 of all industrial land is either in the Northeast or along one of the waterfronts, whether it's the Schuylkill or Delaware waterfront. So 3/4 of that land are in those locations. So that's no surprise when we start to talk about what's the future of our waterfronts. We're taking into account the desire for access, recreation, and alternative uses, but also the fact that it's a working waterfront. So that's part of the discussions that the study wanted to really incite. We also had to take from that survey a really close look at what is vacant. And what we found, what this map shows basically is everything in red, these little red splotches, are within the industrial districts, but they're not zoned industrial, so they're vacant. If it's black, that means it's zoned industrial and it's vacant. So if we look at just the kind of the menu of opportunities that we have in the city, it's about 1,300 acres of vacant land that is zoned industrial. That might sound like a lot, but it's actually a very small percentage of what's in these districts. And when you think about how that vacancy is apportioned, there's about 10 parcels that account for 40% of that vacancy. So that means we have to take a very close look at how we use those 10 parcels that are vacant and zoned industrial. But we also have to take into account the fact that a lot of the industrial vacancy are on smaller sites that are difficult to develop. So for instance, we're not looking at greenfield sites in Philadelphia. Obviously, we've got a built-out city. We have sites that are oddly shaped, that have some serious issues in terms of development, either due to its shape or its proximity to infrastructure or the streets that surround it.